In a cold, gray prison yard of a women's correctional facility, a group of inmates set their sights on their newest target, a quiet, unassuming black woman whose steady gaze and solitary demeanor marked her as the perfect prey for their cruelty. They saw her as just another broken soul, a nameless inmate destined to be bullied into submission. But appearances can be deceiving. The woman they planned to break was no ordinary prisoner. Once, she had been the legendary commander of a Delta Force unit, known in hushed military circles as the Shadow Queen, who had led covert missions into enemy territory that few would dare even dream of. Framed for a crime she did not commit, she was now confined within these unforgiving walls, manipulated by a corrupt system that sought to keep her silenced. And now, the ruthless prison gang, self-styled as the Iron Fangs, had been ordered by unseen higher powers to ensure she never uncovered the truth behind her downfall. Before we continue, I invite you, dear reader, to leave your ratings and comments below if you believe that a true fighter's spirit should never be broken. Your support fuels the voices of those who dare to defy injustice. Inside the stark confines of Magnolia Correctional Facility for Women, Nia Washington, once known as Commander Nia Shadow Queen Washington, sat quietly on a cold metal cot in a cramped cell. Her broad shoulders, though now bowed by confinement, still carried the residue of unyielding strength. In another life, she had been revered for her tactical brilliance and unerring courage. Today, however, she was a prisoner, her only companions the memories of a glorious past and the ever-present threat of the Iron Fangs prowling the yard. The prison block, illuminated by the harsh glare of fluorescent lights and the occasional flicker of a faulty bulb, buzzed with a subdued chaos. In the distance, through a small, reinforced window, Nia could see the silhouettes of her tormentors, women marked by tattoos that twisted into symbols of power and intimidation, circling like wolves. Their eyes burned with malice as they observed her every move, their stares heavy with unspoken threats. Nia clenched her fists as she recalled the nights when whispers of her past victories in faraway deserts and hostile territories used to echo in military mess halls. Now, those echoes served as the only remnants of a life that had once been hers. As the day wore on, the tension in the yard grew thicker. During meal breaks, the Iron Fangs would huddle together, their low voices and menacing gestures directed at Nia, sending shivers down her spine. They had labeled her an untouchable threat because of her mysterious silence and the cold, calculating look in her eyes. Yet they had not the faintest idea of the storm that brewed beneath that composed exterior. One chilly afternoon, as Nia sat at a weathered table in the common area, a guard's announcement crackled over the loudspeaker, summoning her to the visitation room. Her heart pounded as she rose and followed the corridor, her mind replaying every story of betrayal and hardship. It was in that sterile room, separated from the outside world by thick glass, that she finally caught a glimpse of Jessica Green, a determined, sharp-eyed lawyer and advocate who had been fighting to clear Nia's name ever since she was wrongfully imprisoned. Jessica's eyes met Nia's as soon as they sat down. "Nia, I've been pulling every string I can find," she said in a low, urgent tone. "The case against you is full of holes, but it's going to take time to expose them. Until then, you must stay safe. I need you to fight if they come for you. Do not let them see fear." Nia's jaw tightened as she nodded silently. Every word from Jessica reminded her that survival in this place depended not only on physical strength, but also on unyielding mental fortitude. Even as Jessica spoke, the distant sound of footsteps grew louder. A guard appeared briefly at the observation window and then moved on, leaving behind an uneasy calm. Nia's mind, however, was anything but calm. She recalled the battles of her past, the scorching heat of desert missions, the rapid-fire exchanges in hostile urban warfare, and wondered how she could possibly channel that same ferocity in a prison yard where the enemy was hidden behind casual glances and cruel laughter. The Iron Fangs, led by a notorious inmate named Blaze, were known for their savagery. Blaze was a woman with a cold smile and eyes that betrayed nothing but cruelty. She carried herself with the arrogance of someone who believed herself untouchable. Her crew moved with a predatory grace through the hallways, and every time they passed by Nia's cell, she could feel the weight of their scorn. Blaze's voice had once been heard in the yard as she taunted, "You think your military training makes you special? Out here, you're just another inmate waiting to be broken." For weeks, Nia had endured the daily torment, her spirit battered but never fully shattered. In her moments of solitude, she would close her eyes and remember the proud days when her unit had marched into battle with purpose and precision. Those memories, though distant, were a source of strength. They reminded her that while her body might be confined, her mind and will remain free. And deep inside, a plan was slowly forming. A plan to reclaim her honor and expose the corruption that had brought her to this hellish place. One particularly grim evening, as a relentless rain battered the prison's exterior and the corridors echoed with the sound of dripping water, chaos erupted in the mess hall. The Iron Fangs, emboldened by their recent displays of power, had orchestrated a surprise attack against Nia. It began with a subtle shift, a sideways glance, a mocking gesture from one of Blaze's lieutenants. Then, without warning, a scuffle broke out. The inmates surged forward, and within moments, Nia found herself surrounded. The first blow came swiftly. A wiry inmate with scars etched on her face lunged at Nia, swinging a makeshift club. Nia, drawing on instincts honed in the heat of combat, sidestepped gracefully. Her body moved with a speed that belied her confined existence, and she countered with a precise strike to her attacker's midsection. The impact echoed in the hall as the assailant crumpled to the floor. Yet, the gang was relentless. One by one, they attacked. Each strike, each shout an attempt to break her will. For a long, harrowing moment, the mess hall transformed into a brutal battlefield. Nia's eyes blazed with determination as she defended herself with a mixture of raw strength and tactical precision. Every movement was calculated, every blow measured. Her fists flew, her kicks landed with the force of a soldier accustomed to life-or-death struggles. Even as blood trickled from a cut on her brow and bruises blossomed across her arms, she fought on. The chaos was overwhelming, the sounds of thudding fists and anguished cries mingling with the relentless patter of rain against the concrete floor. In the midst of the melee, Blaze emerged from the fray with a sneer, her voice dripping with malice as she shouted, "This is what happens when you think you're untouchable, Shadow Queen." Her words, intended to mock, only fueled Nia's resolve. With a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hall, Nia launched herself at Blaze. The ensuing confrontation was a blur of violence and determination, a clash of wills that pitted a legendary warrior against a petty tyrant who had forgotten the meaning of honor. Time seemed to slow as Nia's hand connected with Blaze's jaw, sending the gang leader staggering back. For a brief moment, the world narrowed to the fierce, unyielding glare in Nia's eyes. That look, reminiscent of her days on the battlefield, was enough to make even the most hardened members of the Iron Fangs pause. But the reprieve was fleeting. The gang regrouped and resumed their assault with renewed ferocity. In the ensuing struggle, Nia sustained several injuries, a cut along her cheek, a bruise on her shoulder, but she refused to yield. Every strike she delivered was not just an act of self-defense, but a declaration that her spirit would not be broken. The sound of clashing bodies and guttural shouts filled the hall until, at last, the prison guards intervened. Their arrival was abrupt and forceful. They separated the combatants and dragged the most aggressive members away, while warning others to return to their cells. Later, in the dim light of her cell that night, Nia sat on her cot, her body aching and her mind racing with both the pain of the attack and the resolve that had seen her through it. She recalled Jessica's words during her visitation, the promise of help, and the conviction that justice would someday be hers. Even in the bleak darkness, a spark of rebellion glowed within her, a determination to survive, to fight, and to reclaim the truth that had been buried under layers of corruption and cruelty. The following morning, as the early light filtered through the narrow window of her cell, Nia awoke to the sound of footsteps approaching. A guard unlocked the door and beckoned her to come to the visitation room. Her heart pounded, not solely from fear, but from a mix of anticipation and dread. In the visitation room, Jessica Green waited for her, her expression a blend of compassion and steely resolve. Jessica's eyes, always so perceptive, took in every bruise and every sign of weariness on Nia's face. "Imani," Jessica began, but Nia shook her head gently. "Call me Nia," she said, her voice hoarse yet defiant. Jessica's face softened as she continued. "I have good news. The appeal hearing has been fast-tracked. The judge has seen our evidence, and there's a growing chorus of support outside these walls. People are beginning to speak up. I need you to hold on just a little longer." Nia looked away for a moment, recalling the promise of freedom, the possibility of clearing her name, and the memory of her illustrious past. "I will," she whispered, though her voice trembled with the weight of uncertainty. Jessica reached out, placing a reassuring hand over Nia's. "Your story is inspiring, Nia. You have a legacy that extends far beyond these confines. And remember, if you believe in our fight for justice and in the power of truth, please leave your ratings and comments below after you read this account. Your voice can be the spark that ignites change." Over the next few days, the tension in Magnolia Correctional Facility for women grew palpable. Rumors of Nia's reputation, the legendary warrior hidden behind a quiet demeanor, spread through the prison. Some inmates looked upon her with awe. Others, particularly members of the Iron Fangs, watched her every move with renewed hostility. Blaze, though temporarily subdued, seethed in silence, gathering her allies for another assault. One night, as the facility plunged into an eerie quiet punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the drip of water from leaking pipes, Nia felt that all too familiar pressure building in the corridors. The Iron Fangs had been spotted near her cell block, and the air was thick with tension. Nia's pulse raced as she prepared herself mentally for what might come next. She knew that in this environment, every moment could be her last. Every whisper of movement a harbinger of violence. The ambush came swiftly. As Nia was returning from a brief walk in the yard, the corridor lights flickered and went dim, plunging the passage into near darkness. Suddenly, rough hands gripped her from behind. A familiar, mocking voice echoed in the darkness. "You thought you could hide your strength, Delta Queen? We're here to remind you of your place." Nia's heart pounded fiercely, and she reacted on pure instinct. With a burst of energy that recalled her military training, she twisted sharply, using the momentum to strike back. The clash in the corridor was brutal and unrelenting. Shouts, the sound of fists meeting flesh, and the reverberation of impacts against concrete filled the narrow space. Nia fought with every ounce of strength and discipline she possessed. Her body moved with the precision of a seasoned warrior. Every block, every counterattack was executed with lethal efficiency. In that moment, the shadows of the corridor bore witness to her defiance. Even as she sustained blows that sent shockwaves of pain through her limbs, she remained focused on survival. The Iron Fangs were relentless, their coordinated attacks designed to subdue her completely. But Nia was determined not to yield. Each time she stumbled, she rose again, fueled by the memory of a time when she had led her team into battles that were far more dangerous than this. The skirmish escalated, and for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of struggle echoed down the dark hall. Nia's mind flashed back to the proud moments of her past, a time when she had been the commander, a beacon of strength and strategy, revered by her comrades. Those memories steeled her resolve now. Amidst the chaos, she managed to land a decisive blow against one of her attackers, sending the thug reeling and momentarily scattering the ranks of the Iron Fangs. It was a small victory, but in that grim corridor, it was enough to momentarily slow the tide of aggression. Just as the battle reached its fevered pitch, the heavy clatter of boots signaled the arrival of additional guards. Their intervention forced the Iron Fangs to retreat, dragging their wounded away as the corridor slowly fell silent once more. Nia, breathing heavily, stood alone in the dim light. The pain from her injuries was sharp, but it was overshadowed by the resolve that burned within her. She knew that this fight was not merely for survival. It was a stand against the systemic injustice that had branded her an outcast and had tried to erase her identity. In the days that followed, Nia continued to recover in her cell. Every bruise, every cut was a reminder of the assault, but also a testament to her resilience. Her reputation as the Shadow Queen of the Delta Force might have been relegated to whispers in the corridors, but now those whispers had grown into a defiant roar among the inmates. Rumors began to circulate that she was planning her own rebellion, a quiet, calculated resistance against the tyranny of the Iron Fangs and the corrupt system that had ensnared her. During a scheduled visitation session a week later, Jessica returned to the visitation room. The normally impassive guard briefly allowed them a private moment. Jessica's eyes, filled with fierce determination, locked onto Nia's. "I have news," she said quietly. "The appeal hearing has been rescheduled for tomorrow, and we've gathered enough evidence to not only challenge your conviction, but also expose the brutality and corruption that festers within this facility. I need you to stay strong, Nia. Your courage is already inspiring a movement both inside and outside these walls. And please, if you believe our fight for justice and truth is worth every sacrifice, leave your ratings and comments below after you share this story. Every voice matters." Nia managed a faint smile as she nodded. "I will," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor of pain that still lingered. In that brief moment, the bond between them was palpable, a lifeline forged in the crucible of hardship and shared determination. That night, as the facility settled into an uneasy quiet, Nia lay awake on her cot. The rhythmic drip of water and the low hum of the ventilation system provided a backdrop to her racing thoughts. She remembered the days of her former life, the camaraderie of soldiers, the adrenaline of missions, and the unwavering belief in her own strength. Now, confined to a cell in a women's prison, she felt the weight of injustice pressing down on her. The betrayal by the very system she had once served was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, in that darkness, a spark of rebellion had taken root. She was resolved not to let the Iron Fangs, nor the corrupt guards and administrators, break her spirit. Over the next several weeks, the struggle within Magnolia Correctional Facility for women took on a life of its own. Nia's defiance resonated with many inmates, and whispers of her past exploits spread like wildfire through the cell blocks. Some looked up to her as a symbol of resistance, while others feared the repercussions of defying the established order. The prison administration, aware of the growing unrest, began tightening security measures and monitoring her movements more closely. But every attempt to isolate her only served to reinforce her resolve. One fateful afternoon, as Nia was transferred to a different cell block for protective custody, a well-organized assault by a rival faction of the Iron Fangs erupted in the common area. In the ensuing chaos, as alarms blared and guards scrambled to restore order, Nia found herself cornered by a small group of attackers. Their leader, a vicious inmate known as Raven, sneered at her. "You think your military training makes you special? Out here, you're just another target." Raven's voice dripped with venom as her cohorts closed in, their movements synchronized in a display of raw brutality. In that critical moment, Nia's training took over. With a fluid motion, she evaded the first blow, countering with a series of strikes that spoke of years of discipline and combat expertise. Her fists and feet moved with a precision that belied the cramped space of the cell block. The struggle was fierce and unyielding. Every impact, every cry of pain was etched into the sterile air. Though outnumbered, Nia fought with a determination that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The clash continued until the arrival of additional guards forced the attackers to retreat, leaving behind a battered silence and a trail of wounded pride. Bruised but unbowed, Nia retreated to her cell that evening, the adrenaline of battle still pulsing through her veins. The scars of the confrontation were physical and emotional, a constant reminder that the fight for justice was not confined to the courtroom, but was waged every day in the harsh reality of prison life. As she sat in the darkness, she silently vowed that she would not allow her identity as the Shadow Queen to be diminished by those who sought to break her. Instead, she would use every ounce of her strength and every fragment of her past to forge a future where truth and justice prevailed. In the following days, news of the altercation began to ripple through the facility. Inmates whispered in hushed tones about the fierce woman who had stood up to the Iron Fangs, and even some of the guards exchanged glances that betrayed a measure of respect. Outside the prison, Jessica's legal battles and media efforts had started to bear fruit. The appeal hearing was generating widespread attention, and civil rights activists began to take notice of the case of the legendary Delta Force commander who now found herself imprisoned unjustly. During one of her weekly visits, Jessica shared further updates with Nia. "We have new evidence, Nia. Documents and recordings that expose the corruption behind your conviction and the abuse in this facility. The judge is taking notice, but you must stay vigilant. The higher-ups will do everything in their power to silence you." Nia listened intently, absorbing every word as if it were a lifeline. "I will not let them take away my voice," she replied firmly. "I have fought battles before. I will fight this one too." Jessica leaned forward, her tone both supportive and insistent. "If you believe in our fight for justice, and if you think that your story can inspire others, please remember to leave your ratings and comments below. Every piece of support from the outside reinforces our resolve. The truth must not be buried, and your voice is essential in this movement." Nia's eyes flashed with determination as she nodded slowly, silently promising that she would not be defeated. As weeks turned into months, the atmosphere within Magnolia Correctional Facility for women became charged with an undercurrent of rebellion. The Iron Fangs, stung by their previous defeat, grew more ruthless. They began targeting not only Nia, but also anyone who dared speak in her defense. Raven and her cohorts patrolled the corridors with renewed ferocity, issuing threats and exacting brutal punishments on those who resisted their authority. Yet even as fear spread among the inmates, a countercurrent of solidarity emerged. A few brave women, inspired by Nia's unyielding spirit, began to organize secret meetings to discuss ways to stand up against the gang's tyranny. They exchanged whispered plans and coded messages, forging bonds that transcended the barriers of cell blocks and guard watch. In one such clandestine meeting in the dead of night, Nia and a small group of trusted inmates gathered in a hidden corner of the library, a rarely used room lined with dusty shelves and neglected books. The air was thick with tension and determination as one of them, a soft-spoken woman named Tiana, spoke up. "We cannot let the Iron Fangs continue to terrorize us. We have seen what happens when one of us stands up. They come down on us like locusts. But if we unite, if we support each other, we might just have a chance to reclaim our dignity." Nia's eyes softened for a moment as she regarded Tiana and the others. "We must remember that we are more than what they want us to be," she said, her voice resolute. "We are survivors, fighters. Every scar, every bruise is a reminder that we have overcome, and we will not be broken by those who seek to crush our spirit." Inspired by Nia's words, the group began to develop a plan to subtly undermine the Iron Fangs' authority. They would record instances of abuse, document the gang's brutal tactics, and secretly send the evidence to trusted journalists outside the prison walls. Every act of defiance, no matter how small, was a step toward reclaiming their power. Meanwhile, Jessica continued to work tirelessly on the legal front, securing new evidence that painted a damning picture of systemic corruption both within the prison and in the broader judicial process that had led to Nia's wrongful conviction. One particularly harrowing incident occurred one stormy night when a power outage plunged the facility into darkness. Amidst the chaos, the Iron Fangs saw an opportunity to strike at Nia's cell. With only the sporadic flicker of emergency lights for illumination, They pounded on her cell door, their voices low and menacing. "Open up, Shadow Queen, or we'll break you down," one of them hissed. Nia's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained silent, her mind racing as she calculated her next move. In that moment of uncertainty, the sound of a guard's whistle cut through the darkness, and the would-be attackers were forced to retreat. The incident left Nia shaken, but more determined than ever to fight back. She knew that every attack was not just an attempt to intimidate her, but a clear message from the corrupt forces that control the prison. In the days following the attack, the tension reached a boiling point. Rumors of the secret recordings and the growing resistance reached the ears of the prison administration, and soon the Iron Fangs began to tighten their grip on the population. Yet, even as the environment grew increasingly oppressive, Nia's defiance became a rallying point. Her name spread through the corridors like wildfire, and whispers of the once-feared Delta Force commander turned into chants of hope and resistance among the inmates. The turning point came during a routine head count in the recreation yard. As Nia walked slowly along the perimeter, the Iron Fangs intercepted her. Raven stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. "You think you could defy us? You're nothing but a shadow from your past," she spat. The tension in the yard was palpable as other inmates watched silently, their eyes reflecting a mix of fear and admiration. Without hesitation, Nia squared her shoulders and met Raven's gaze head-on. "I'm more than a shadow," she declared, her voice ringing clear and resolute. "I am the Delta Queen, and I will not be broken by the likes of you." For a moment, the yard fell silent, as if the very air held its breath. Then, a murmur of support rose from the gathered inmates, a subtle but unmistakable sign that the tide was beginning to turn. That confrontation marked the beginning of a series of covert actions led by Nia and her small band of allies. Over the following weeks, they meticulously documented every act of brutality and abuse, smuggling out recordings and written accounts hidden in the folds of discarded newspapers and behind loose bricks in the wall. Their evidence, once pieced together, would form the cornerstone of a new legal battle that promised to expose not only the Iron Fangs, but also the systemic corruption that had allowed such cruelty to flourish. One afternoon, as rain fell steadily against the barred windows of her cell, Nia sat quietly and reflected on the past. She remembered the proud moments of her military career, the camaraderie, the honor of serving her country, and the hard-won victories that had earned her the title of Shadow Queen. Those memories, though distant, were a source of strength in the midst of despair. She recalled the proud smile of her mother when she had returned home in uniform, the folded flag from her father's military funeral that had always been a reminder of sacrifice and duty. Now, confined in a cell, those images burned in her mind as both a memory of what she had lost and a beacon of what she must reclaim. In that quiet moment, Nia vowed that she would not let the darkness of this place extinguish her light. She would fight with every fiber of her being, not just for herself, but for every woman here who had been crushed under the weight of an unjust system. Her determination was palpable, a silent promise that the legacy of the Delta Queen would live on, even if it meant waging war within these grim walls. As word of her resilience spread, Jessica's efforts outside the prison began to yield results. New media reports, bolstered by the covert recordings and testimonies from fellow inmates, painted a damning picture of abuse and corruption within Magnolia Correctional Facility for women. Civil rights groups rallied behind Nia's story, demanding an independent investigation and a complete review of the case that had led to her wrongful incarceration. The public outcry grew louder each day, forcing local officials to take notice of the systemic failures that had allowed such brutality to flourish. One evening, during a televised forum on prison reform, Jessica appeared alongside several prominent activists to discuss the dire situation in Magnolia. "We must listen to the voices of those who are silenced," she declared passionately. "Nia Washington is not just a prisoner. She is a symbol of resistance against a system that has long ignored the truth. I urge you, viewers, if you believe in justice and the power of the human spirit to overcome oppression, please please leave your ratings and comments below. Let your support be the spark that ignites real change. The call to action resonated deeply with the audience, and soon Nia's story became a rallying cry for reform both inside and outside the prison walls. In the following weeks, tensions escalated further. The Iron Fangs, feeling cornered by the growing resistance, began to plan an all-out assault designed to silence Nia once and for all. Late one stormy night, as thunder rumbled in the distance and rain pounded against the facility's concrete exterior, the gang struck. In a meticulously coordinated attack, they attempted to breach Nia's cell using crude tools and sheer brute force. The assault was swift and vicious, the sounds of crashing metal and anguished cries echoing through the corridor. Nia, though caught off guard, reacted with the speed and precision of a seasoned warrior. Her training surged back into her muscles as she defended herself against the barrage. The struggle that ensued was chaotic and brutal, every moment stretching into an eternity of pain and defiance. With every desperate blow she delivered, Nia reminded her attackers, and herself, that her spirit was unbreakable. In the midst of the chaos, the sound of a guard's shout finally brought the attack to a temporary halt. The Iron Fangs, momentarily repelled, retreated into the shadows, their threat lingering like a dark promise. Exhausted and wounded, Nia collapsed onto the cold floor of her cell, her breathing ragged. The scars from the assault were both physical and emotional, a harsh reminder that the fight for justice was fraught with peril. Yet, even as she nursed her injuries, the fire within her refused to be quenched. She knew that the battle was far from over. Every act of aggression, every threat from the Iron Fangs was a testament to the corruption that had ensnared Magnolia Correctional Facility. And with each day that passed, her resolve to expose that corruption grew stronger. In the days that followed, Nia's struggle became a silent legend among the inmates. Whispers of her exploits spread like wildfire through the cell blocks, and even the most timid among the prisoners found a glimmer of hope in her defiance. Jessica continued to work tirelessly on her appeal, gathering more evidence and rallying public support. Each visit from Jessica became a beacon of hope, a moment when Nia was reminded that she was not forgotten, that the world outside was listening, that justice was possible. During one particularly somber visitation, Jessica's eyes shone with determination as she slid a thick folder across the table to Nia. "This evidence," she said in a hushed, urgent tone, "proves not only the brutality of the Iron Fangs, but also the widespread corruption that permeates this institution. We have recorded conversations, hidden documents, and eyewitness testimonies that will overturn the false narrative built against you." Nia accepted the folder with steady hands, feeling the weight of its contents. "Thank you," she replied softly. "I will use every bit of strength I have left to see this through." Jessica reached out, placing a reassuring hand over Nia's. "If you believe in our fight for justice and in the power of truth, please remember to share your thoughts, ratings, and comments online. Every supportive word brings us closer to a future where the truth is not silenced." The legal and media battles raged on, but inside Magnolia, the atmosphere grew increasingly volatile. The Iron Fangs were not willing to let their control slip without a fight. Their leader, Raven, now more ruthless than ever, began to plot a decisive move that would crush any spark of rebellion. One cold night, as the facility lay under a heavy, oppressive silence, Raven and her crew assembled near the common area. Their plan was simple yet brutal: to stage a public display of dominance by capturing Nia during a routine head count and subjecting her to a humiliating punishment that would serve as a warning to all. But Nia was no longer the broken inmate they believed her to be. Word of the impending ambush had spread through the network of sympathetic prisoners, and a few brave souls had managed to warn her in secret. Armed with this information, Nia steeled herself for the confrontation. As the head count began, she moved with deliberate caution, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The tension was palpable. Even the clanging of cell doors and the shuffling of feet seemed to reverberate with foreboding. The ambush was launched suddenly. As Nia rounded a corner in the corridor, she was met with a wall of aggression. Raven's voice cut through the din. "Today, we teach you that you do not belong here." In that instant, chaos erupted. Inmates surged forward, and the corridor became a battleground. Nia fought with every ounce of strength and discipline that had once made her a revered commander. Fists flew and bodies collided in a flurry of violence. The sound of blows, the anguished cries, and the relentless pounding of hearts filled the space. For what seemed like an eternity, the struggle raged. Nia's movements were a blend of fluid grace and raw power. Each strike she delivered was a calculated reminder of her past, a past where she had led elite teams into the heart of danger. Though outnumbered and pushed to the brink, she refused to yield. With a final, defiant roar, she incapacitated one of her attackers, sending him crashing against the cold concrete wall. The corridor fell into a heavy, trembling silence as the remaining members of the Iron Fangs hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. The sudden arrival of guards shattered that fragile pause. Their voices rang out, commanding order and retribution. The Iron Fangs, now disoriented, retreated into the deeper shadows of the facility. Nia, panting and bruised, stood amid the scattered remnants of the skirmish, her eyes blazing with both pain and unyielding determination. She knew that this battle was merely one chapter in a long war, a war not just for her freedom, but for the dignity and justice that had been stripped away by a corrupt system. In the aftermath of the attack, as the facility slowly returned to its oppressive normalcy, Nia lay awake in her cell, her thoughts a turbulent mix of memory and resolve. She recalled the proud, unyielding figure she once was, a leader who had commanded respect on the battlefield, and she vowed that she would reclaim that identity. The scars on her body were reminders of the brutality she had endured, but they were also badges of honor, symbols of a fight for survival that could not be silenced. Days turned into weeks, and the legal appeal continued to gather momentum. Outside, Jessica and a team of dedicated activists, lawyers, and journalists worked tirelessly to expose the systemic corruption within Magnolia Correctional Facility for women and to clear Nia's name. Their efforts culminated in a series of explosive media reports that captured the nation's attention. Headlines blared across news networks: legendary Delta Force commander behind bars, and injustice in the shadows, the untold story of Nia Washington. Each broadcast, each article served to rally public opinion and to shine a harsh light on the abuses occurring behind prison walls. One crisp morning, during a rare moment of calm in the visitation room, Jessica leaned forward across the glass and said, "Nia, our voices are reaching the outside world. People are watching, and they are outraged by the treatment you have endured. If you believe that our fight for justice and truth is a battle worth winning, please do not forget to share your thoughts and leave your ratings and comments online. Every word of support is a weapon against the forces that seek to silence us." Nia's eyes glistened with determination as she nodded slowly, the weight of her struggles mingling with a spark of hope. As the appeal hearing approached, the atmosphere both inside and outside the prison grew, charged with anticipation. Protests erupted in the nearby city, and social media platforms buzzed with messages of solidarity and calls for reform. Meanwhile, within Magnolia, whispers of Nia's unwavering defiance had begun to inspire a clandestine movement among the inmates. Small groups met in secret, sharing their stories of abuse and plotting ways to hold the corrupt regime accountable. Nia became a symbol, a beacon of resistance in a place designed to break the human spirit. The day of the appeal hearing arrived with an air of tense expectation. In a packed courtroom, Nia's legal team presented the compelling evidence that had been gathered over months. A trove of original documents, covert recordings, and eyewitness testimonies that exposed not only the injustice of her conviction, but also the rampant corruption that had festered within Magnolia for far too long. The judge, a stern figure with a reputation for fairness, listened intently as expert after expert testified about the irregularities in the case and the systematic abuses that had led to Nia's incarceration. Outside the courtroom, the city's pulse quickened with every update. Protests, vigils, and marches were held in support of Nia and the broader call for prison reform. Banners bearing slogans like "Justice for the Delta Queen" and "No More Injustice" filled the streets, and voices united in a chorus of defiance against a broken system. The media, sensing a turning point, covered the story with fervor, and soon Nia's plight became a national symbol of resistance. After hours of grueling testimony and heated exchanges, the judge finally delivered his ruling. In a moment that seemed to freeze time, he declared that the evidence against Nia was insufficient and that her case warranted a full review. The courtroom erupted in murmurs of relief and cautious optimism. For Nia, it was a small but significant victory, a recognition that her fight was not in vain and that the truth, however deeply buried, could eventually be unearthed. Back in the prison visitation room later that day, Jessica and Nia met once more. Jessica's eyes shone with both pride and determination as she said, "This victory is a testament to your strength, Nia. But our battle is far from over. Every comment you receive, every rating you post online, every voice that stands with you, is a blow against the corruption that has kept you down for so long. Please, if you believe in our fight for justice, share your story. Let the world know that even in the darkest places, the light of truth and resilience will never be extinguished." Nia's voice was soft yet resolute as she replied, "I will. I promise I will continue to fight, not just for my freedom, but for every person who has been silenced by injustice." In the months that followed, the ripple effects of the appeal hearing began to transform not only Nia's life, but also the culture within Magnolia Correctional Facility for women. The oppressive system, once dominated by the Iron Fangs and their brutal enforcers, was slowly forced to confront the truth. Inmates began to speak out, and internal investigations were launched into the widespread abuses that had been ignored for too long. The movement for justice grew, fueled by the bravery of one woman who had refused to let her past define her future. Though the journey was fraught with danger and uncertainty, Nia's indomitable spirit remained unbroken. Every setback only strengthened her resolve, and every threat from her adversaries became a call to arms. The legacy of the Delta Force commander, the Shadow Queen, was not one of mere survival, but of relentless resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. And as her story continued to spread beyond the cold, gray walls of Magnolia, it served as a powerful reminder that true strength comes from within and that no system, however corrupt, can extinguish the flame of justice. As I conclude this recounting of Nia Washington's extraordinary struggle, I once again urge you, dear reader, to leave your ratings and comments below if you find her tale inspiring. Your feedback is not only a tribute to her unyielding spirit, but also a beacon of hope for all those who continue to fight for justice in the face of adversity. In this relentless battle against corruption and abuse, Nia's journey stands as a testament to the power of the human spirit, a reminder that even when stripped of freedom and dignity, a warrior's heart can still burn brightly. Her struggle, marked by fierce confrontations, heartbreaking losses, and small, hard-won victories, is a clarion call to all who believe in the truth and in the right to live with honor and dignity. And so, in the quiet moments of the night when the harsh fluorescent lights flicker over cold concrete walls, Nia sits, her body battered, her mind scarred, yet her will unbroken. She knows that tomorrow, when the call for justice echoes once more, she will rise again, ready to reclaim not only her own destiny, but also to inspire a movement that will one day change the world. Thank you for reading this story of resilience, defiance, and the unwavering power of truth. Please share your thoughts, leave your ratings and comments below, and let your support echo far beyond these walls. Together, we remind the world that no matter how deep the darkness, the light of justice and unity will always prevail.